Hey there, and welcome back to the Complicated Kids podcast. I'm your host, Gabrielle Nicolay. I am a toddler whisperer, a speech therapist, and a parent coach. And today I've got Jenny Friedman with me. Jenny, welcome.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello. You are a feeding coach and registered dietitian. And I just want you to tell the good people who you work with and what you do for them.
Yeah, thank you. Who I work with right now, I work with kids who, for lack of a better term, are extremely picky eaters. And I also work with their parents. So these are kids who just have a tough time eating a really limited diet. Picky may not be the perfect term to describe them, but that is sort of a well understood term. And so that's what we're going with right now. It's the best that we've got. And I help them, become kids who can comfortably and confidently eat more foods.
Yeah. And when we're talking about picky eating, let's define our terms a little bit here because we are going
Mm.
to spend the rest of the time here talking about picky eating and some things that parents can do. But also, when we were sort of prepping before I hit record, the question comes up like, what do people need to know that they don't know? And you mentioned there's picky eating and then there's what? So let's describe it a little.
Yeah, there's something else. Um, So, quote unquote, picky eating, which is really the right term, it's a developmental phase that kids slash toddlers go through, maybe 1 year, 2 years old, up until maybe 6 years old is sort of the textbook range. This is, again, like what we typically think of as normal. It's just a increased selectivity, sort of this fickleness with their eating preferences. One day they love something, next day they don't. One day they eat you can't believe what they're chowing down on. The next day you're like, nothing at all. So that is, normal. We sort of expect that to happen. But then there's, these eating challenges or other things going on that can contribute to a kid having a limited diet. And that is not necessarily picky eating. A lot of the time, it is sort of dismissed as it's just picky eating. It's a phase. It's normal. It happens to everyone. It will pass. But for these kids, it's not a phase, and it's actually happening not because they're seeking more independence or not because they love saying no or because their nutritional needs have changed. It's because maybe they have sensory sensitivities or oral motor deficits, weaknesses, or some sort of medical complication or a developmental delay. So there's something else going on beneath the surface that's leading toward them to have a limited diet. They seem like they're picky, but it's actually something else.
I
I'd
love
say
what you
yeah,
said
yes.
because picky eating as a developmental thing is happening at a time when toddlers and young children are exerting more independence. They are saying no. They are flexing their independence muscles in different ways, on different in at different timelines, but roughly on the same schedule, right? An 18-month-old is who can walk is walking in the opposite direction from you. That's what they're doing. They are also throwing their food over the side of their
Oh,
tray,
indeed.
right? And they are refusing to eat foods sometimes. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about picky eating. What I hear you saying, and I'd love to go into what are some of the, because the other thing that you're describing as extremely picky eating, or we can talk about what the term that we want to
Hmm.
use is a restricted number of foods, an underlying reason other than natural development, progression for that picky eating to be happening, for that selectivity to be happening, and probably some behaviors that are getting layered on top of that, like meltdowns and refusal and
Absolutely.
arching your back when you get put into the high chair. And can
Yeah.
you talk about what are some things that, if we know we're dealing with problem eating, what are some things that parents might see in young
Yeah.
kids?
So it's tricky, even trickier, because you can see this developmentally kind of typical picky eating layered on top of these eating challenges. So it's super tricky. And I would say, so everything that you described with, yeah, meltdowns, not wanting to be in the high chair, we can see that in both camps of kind of this extreme and this developmental. But some hallmarks for me, in kind of this extreme umbrella is that their eating is getting worse, not better, and it's very consistent. And so you might see your child dropping foods and they never reaccept them. That can happen. Kids can drop foods developmentally, typical picky eating. They can drop foods, but they'll reaccept them at some point. So their diet is typically kind of in this homeostasis. But a diet getting smaller and smaller is like a telltale sign something's up. Maybe restrictions of food based on sensory qualities, usually texture is a big one. So like we're not eating any yogurts or smooth, wet foods. We're really eating dry, crunchy foods. And in particular, really in both categories, we see a restriction of typically vegetables and meats. So those are hard foods.
Pause for a second.
Yes.
Talk about why we see
Yes.
restrictions in vegetables and meats. And because
Certainly.
this is stuff that you and I spend a lot of time thinking about.
Right, that we know, yeah.
We have dissected all the qualities of a food. And, I for one, can explain to a 4-year-old, a Cheez-It is salty and crunchy and room temperature. It tastes the same every time.
It's all of those things every single time. So that is really like hitting the nail on the head. The sameness every single time is like magic to a picky eater's ears, especially one who really struggles to eat. They love knowing what to expect. They love that consistency. Meat, it is, like even every bite to bite can be different. Same with a vegetable. The texture is just more complicated. It's more complicated from an oral motor perspective, a sensory perspective. So there's just so much unknown, and that is really tricky and uncomfortable. They like, things that are cozy and comfortable.
And even I had some berries this morning. It's berry season.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I had 2 raspberries. They could not have tasted more different within the scope of what I, as an adult, know a raspberry tastes like.
Completely.
Now rewind.
It's tricky.
Yeah, but rewind to like a 2-year-old who's never had a raspberry. And now every raspberry tastes different. Those are different experiences every single time for that kid.
Yeah, that's also a great point.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. And because part of it too is, kind of building that comfort and tolerance and knowing of something. And so when you're working with a raspberry, a vegetable, a meat, and every time it's different, you're sort of starting from ground zero every time, versus the Cheez-It. You can learn that one's, you can learn that one quickly, and it's engineered to be irresistibly delicious. They've got that going for them too.
They do. And that's like a whole other discipline and conversation that we will get into another time, because that matters also. Okay, so we've got sort of texture happening. We've got ability to handle from a sensory perspective or even a motor perspective or both. And when issues arise, we can see behaviors sort of with regular picky eating, but also extreme picky eating, or do you have another term that you use for that?
No, I mean, we could, so you could call it problem eating. I often say eating challenges. There's no great term. There are 2 diagnoses that could potentially fit. So ARFID, which is avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, is technically an eating disorder. And then there's pediatric feeding disorder. Those are 2 that like a doctor, a mental health worker could potentially diagnose somebody with. And those are helpful, but they don't even catch every child who struggles to eat. So extreme picky eating is far from perfect, but I think it captures, from my understanding, it's sort of like the lingo that everybody understands. There's like, okay, picky eating, and then there's the extreme stuff.
Yeah.
But it's not perfect.
And so if we have an extreme picky eater at home, what are parents to do? What are they supposed to do?
Oof. So many things that you can do. So, One of the things that's pretty tricky to sort of think about and describe and certainly uphold as a parent, and this really fits for both, extreme picky eating and typical picky eaters, is to avoid bringing stress and frustration and tension into the eating environment and the eating relationship, that dynamic. At the end or the beginning, the most important thing really is that like eating is a comfortable place where we can enjoy being together, where we can potentially enjoy the food. The second that we start, showing up with that tension or trying to make things happen or yelling or pressuring, it really makes it hard to come back from. It just creates this spiral of further avoidance, further anxiety, further struggle for everybody involved.
For everybody involved. And I want to draw this out very specifically for people because I can already hear the yeah, buts. Yeah, but they have to eat. And I'm the one who's supposed to feed them.
Yeah.
Okay. If I come with that energy, and you can hear it in my voice already, right? I've got tension in my vocal folds. I've got my shoulders are raised. I'm like, I got to feed this kid. When my nervous system is dysregulated, when I'm feeling stressed, my child picks up on that. They're not doing it on purpose. This is how human beings, this is how mammals are wired, right? This is how we determine what's safe, what's not safe to do. If I'm bringing stress to the table, I am neurologically, biologically, hormonally signaling that eating is not safe, actually. I'm creating the opposite of what I want for my child. And we're doing that with so much love and so much good intention, and it's backfiring.
It does.
Neurologically. And so I want people to really understand this is happening like subcognitively, right? Subconsciously.
Yep. It's one of the trickiest things that I feel I have to communicate, or that I try to communicate. But it's really the most important. Almost everybody I work with is sort of in this trap. It makes sense. As parents, we are told really that it's our job to make sure that our kids grow and eat and all of that. So it feels like it's our responsibility. But the more that you try, the less really it's going to happen. The other thing, like hormonally you mentioned, like when stress is there, the appetite goes down, like the stress hormones are decreasing the hunger signals. So it's really counterproductive. And we know it's hard for so many reasons. I feel like dinner is just a stressful time. For dinner, breakfast, all the meals with kids are stressful, kind of even when kids eat well.
Yeah.
So it is a tricky thing. It's an important thing.
It's so interesting because I think, and we'll just stay here for just another second, and then we'll move to something else that parents can do, but it really does bear repeating. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your child's picky eating is to take care of yourself. Yeah. And that doesn't seem like a direct line, but it really is. Because give me an example of, can you like give us a story, an example of a time when parent got better regulated and you started to see progress in the child? Is there a good?
Yeah, I mean, this is related and a little different, but this family, their son is 8, so a little bit kind of on the older end. And they were telling me like, this is going on for years and years and years. Everybody knows it's a problem. So sort of that tension is there for every single meal. And on top of it, with good intentions, every time they're eating together, parents say like, would you like to try a bite? Do you want some? This is yummy. Would you like a taste? They're not begging, bribing, forcing, but it just brings up this tension. Every single question, every meal. The second they stopped doing that, things changed. Like tasting started to happen. There was improvement in the way meals felt, in the sense interest in eating. So even that well-intentioned little question,
it feels so innocuous. It feels like what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to offer our child the food. And of course, as a speech therapist, I'm the person who's always telling parents to talk less, right? The minute we say it, it becomes a demand. It's no longer an offer.
Yeah.
Versus putting the food on the plate, putting the plate in front of the child and sitting down to eat our own meal and ignoring what happens. And I'm going to back you up on this. I have a family that I work with. The minute we stopped paying attention to what went in the mouth, everything was going in the mouth. Now, you know, at, to explore.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
were not swallowing vast quantities of food. Okay.
Yeah. But it's a change. It's like that the switch is flipped to this openness, like this kind of willingness, curiosity. It really changes things. And of course, that's not the only thing going on. That, you know, and it's not necessarily the only thing that needs to be addressed,
Yep.
but it's a big one for, I think, every family that
Yeah.
I work with.
Yeah. What are some other things that parents should be doing? I mean, I'm going to take one off the top here, which is consult a professional who deals with feeding.
Yeah.
If you're
Biggie.
worried,
Biggie.
yeah, right? Go ask somebody who knows.
Yeah. And if that person doesn't know or shuts you down, find another one. There are people, so I frequently hear, you know, our pediatrician said, let's wait, or they'll eat when they're hungry enough, or this is a phase, or like, you know, all sorts of things. If you feel that really your concerns are not being addressed, find somebody else. You can talk to somebody else, and it doesn't need to be a pediatrician, speech, dietitian, feeding therapist, occupational therapist. There's somebody out there who can help you.
Yeah. Yeah. What else should parents do if they suspect they've got an extremely picky eater?
Yeah, I really think that one, you know, is finding sort of talking to somebody, because finding the root cause is, you know, incredibly important to figuring out the solution. But I would say another thing that in and of itself is not enough, but is so important, is these exposures and really like sensory interactions with food. I think this is the one that we see all over the place. Just let them play and get messy, and that will fix everything. It doesn't fix everything, but it's extremely important. It's an extremely important piece of the puzzle. As all of this is, we can kind of make the environment and the dynamic right. But if we're not giving them the opportunity to try new things or addressing the root cause, then that's only going to take us so far. If we're letting them get messy and explore and participate in cooking or grocery shopping, that's amazing. But if we're not addressing the other things, it's going to only take us so far, or feel like it's not working at all.
Yeah.
So it's another important piece of the puzzle.
There's such a emphasis on, and I've seen it more and more with the parents I work with. I've been doing this for 20 years, and more, kids are staying clean. It's kind of terrible.
Yeah, it is terrible. So if you've got a little one who's just starting, let them get messy. Don't wipe their face, don't wipe their hands. You can do that after when they're done. It's really, you know, it's an interesting trend, but I do know it's like a warning sign. You want to condition them to get messy, let them explore. That's how kids are learning. That's how they are desensitizing their bodies and teaching their brain what to expect, no matter what age they are or kind of what difficulty, if any, they have. It's an extremely important experience, learning opportunity.
I'm going to do this again I want to really like highlight this in bright yellow marker. When our brains don't experience something, they don't know or understand it. If you have a brain, if your child has a brain, or if you have a brain that is wired for protection rather than curiosity, for a no rather than a yes, and we're feeding that no of, you can stay neat, you can eat a pouch where you don't have to actually experience any of the food, it just goes right into your stomach. Now we are signaling to the brain that this is the normal and that anything else is dangerous. And we're going to have to fight or flee when we experience anything other than that. So if I get a little bit of puree on my finger, and I'm 4 years old, because I've never had puree on my finger when I was 6 months old and I was meant to be finger painting with the yogurt in the tray, my brain is registering that as a threat. That's real. That's a neurological reality. And so I just like... I feel like I'm like blowing this up and oh my God,
It's real. Like, as you
it's
said,
real.
it's real. Yeah.
Right? And so,
And
you go ahead.
we also, kind of one of the, I hate to say mistakes, and this is also kind of human nature and it makes sense, but to take this feedback loop. So maybe we tried to give our kids the experience. They did not enjoy it. They did not eat. We stopped giving them the experience. Totally understandable, but we are further training them. We are like further, like making that groove. And so often we see it also like, oh, they're not eating the cauliflower. I'm just going to stop serving it. So the more that we sort of give in, the less we are helping them. So exposure is very important. Yeah.
Sometimes food waste, I know this came up for me as a
Oh, it's a big
parent.
deal. Yeah.
It's a big deal. And I think let's attempt to dismantle this right here, right now. Many adults come with a pre-programmed belief that they inherited from their parents that we should not waste food and we shouldn't waste food, okay? And when we are teaching young children how to eat, exposing them to food is the goal, and whether they eat it or not is not the question. So, what if we're not wasting food when we keep presenting the cauliflower for over the course of 6 months or a year every so often? What if that's not a waste? It's a shift, right?
Yeah, I saw a great, I am not responsible for this. I don't remember who is. The paper that your kid uses as they are practicing penmanship and learning how to write, that's not a waste. So same, that's your food. They're practicing eating, they're learning how to eat. This is not a waste. It's a necessary it just comes with the territory. It's a necessary expense.
And wouldn't you rather eat cauliflower than Cheerios? As an adult
Well,
who's going to
yes,
sweep up
I
after
know.
them.
That is true. Yes. Yeah. Whose leftovers do you want? Or which leftovers do you want? And there can be both. Both are fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, what are some things, what are some places to start? Let's say I suspect my child's a picky eater. I'm going to go see the person, the dietitian, the occupational therapist, the feeding specialist, the speech therapist who specializes in feeding. I'm going to go see them. What's like a thing that, is there a thing that you often tell parents, like as a first step, like a strategy? Other than, I mean, and we've talked about a couple of them here.
Yeah. Everything that we've talked about is a great starting place. And I think maybe not so much as a strategy of a strategy as a mindset shift is really kind of setting your expectations. Everything that we told you here today and we've talked about, all of this works, all of this is great. It is not like a one and done. Oh, I showed up to the meal feeling great and I didn't say anything. It didn't work. Yeah, it might take some time to undo this. They're kids, so much is happening here. So this kind of consistency, persistence, patience, and the expectation that this is going to take some time, and that you can do the perfect thing. You can introduce a food that they should love. They're not necessarily going to want to try it, eat it, explore it, anything at all on that very first time. They might need many opportunities. So that, and it does not mean that it's a failure. So that willingness to stay in the game, it's a long game. It's the marathon, not a sprint. Lots of trade analogies here, but that's truly what it is.
I love what you said. Nothing has gone wrong if you did all the right, air quotes, things and your child didn't try, look at, respond to the food. It went right. You did the things.
Yeah.
You did your part of the equation and your child did their part of the equation and nothing has gone wrong here. We're just on a long road.
Yeah.
And it wasn't today that whatever X happened. I love that. I love that. It's a lot of mindset. Feeding is a lot of parent mindset shifts, more so than, maybe not more so, as much as skills and desensitization on the part of the child.
Yeah, because it sort of is that. I think, and that's another good thing to keep in mind and sort of a mindset shift. We think that eating is this like normal, not normal, but like a natural thing that we're like, born knowing how to do this. And that is not the case. It's an extremely complicated skill, a learned skill.
This
So
is why we call the podcast Complicated Kids.
there you
And,
go.
and I say this all the time, though. We don't realize how complicated something is when it's going well. We only realize how complicated a skill is when it's not going well. And this is true of all developmental human things, right? Talking,
Yeah.
incredibly hard. Walking, incredibly hard. Eating, incredibly hard.
Yeah.
I often tell kids this too. The inside of your mouth is like one of the few places on your body you can't see. So if you are a kid whose sensory system requires being able to see what's happening, right? And you're using that for cues of safety, you are going to have no safety around eating because you cannot see in there ever.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really, it's a weird thing eating, actually. You're putting something inside your body and it's disappearing. It's a weird thing to do.
So thank you so much, Jenny. This has been great. I know that
Yeah.
people will have gotten a lot of value. If they want to find out more about you, how do they do that?
Sure. So I guess one of two places, or two of two, or three maybe. So you can check me out on Instagram. I'm at Feeding Picky Eaters there. You can head to that same URL, feedingpicklyeaters.com. I also show it now, but I have a book called Stories of Extreme Picky Eating, which is a wonderful, wonderful place to start. If you are wondering if your kid kind of fits this bill, if you're looking for an action plan, if you're curious to hear stories of other kids, it's actually a wonderful starting place.
Nice. And that's available wherever books are sold.
Everywhere. Yeah, wherever books are sold.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We will link to all of that in the
Thank
show
you.
notes. And I hope you'll come back and we'll talk about some other stuff, but this has been such a treat.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Thanks.